What do you do on Sundays?
We talk about Cate Blanchett, the acting, the costumes, the awards, but mostly the Blanchett of it all.
I'm not acting.
You think this is a love affair?
I saw you, Erica. Meeting in the middle.
This is Sundays with Cate, and I'm your host, Murtada Elfadl. Welcome to Sundays with Cate, the podcast series about the films of Cate Blanchett. This is your host, Murtada Elfadl. And guys, I've been promising you that we're going to cover Carol for a very long time. I was a little bit trepidatious because I love this movie so much, but I also feel that it's a movie that's been covered by everyone so deeply, so intimately, so intricately. Even myself, I've written about it. I've written about Cate and Carol. I've talked about it on this podcast, even though there was no episode designed to be ever about Carol. And so I was like, what is there more? Is there more to say? What is there to say? And guess what? It's all about the guest, who you get, and who is going to add the new thing. So I'm excited to welcome, for the first time on Sundays with Cate, filmmaker Luke Willis. Luke, welcome to Sundays with Cate.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to be here to be talking about Cate Blanchett and Carol. I feel like there was a lot of pressure in that lead up.
No pressure at all.
I will do my best to be original.
Yeah, no. We will figure it out together. And first, I usually start with my guests to ask them about Cate Blanchett. Do you remember the first time you saw her in a film, or?
I mean, absolutely. Duh. It was Elizabeth. I mean, like, I was high school, I was in theater school, and that year, first of all, was like an epic year of movies. Great movies came out that year, and Elizabeth right at the top, you know, and that performance, it was like, who is that? May I please worship her?
I know. I felt the same way. It was Elizabeth too for me. And it was just like, who is this? And where's she come from? It was such a Star is Born moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Oh, and then playing Elizabeth and then with Joseph Fiennes, and just like, it was so great. What a great movie. I might have to rewatch it after we do this podcast.
Yes. Or you can also listen to we have 2 episodes on Elizabeth on this podcast. And so we're talking about Carol, which a lot of people who come on the podcast say it's their favorite Cate Blanchett film or favorite Cate Blanchett performance. It's always up there when people talk about the best that she's done. And Luke, what is your favorite Cate Blanchett performance?
Gosh, that's so difficult because I feel like I love so many of them for so many different reasons. She's, you know, while she's always Cate Blanchett, she's also so much of a chameleon. So like, I feel like she's always playing something so different. And that's partly why I just adore her. Why does this name I always forget the name of the movie where she plays the clairvoyant, and it's the murder mystery where and she's in the swamps of the South.
Oh, The Gift.
Yes.
The Gift.
Oh, that is such a great performance. And it's like so just wildly different from anything she's ever done. I also thought like Blue Jasmine was phenomenal.
Yeah.
Right?
Definitely.
What a performance.
Yes. I vacillate between Blue Jasmine and Carol. Like one day it's Blue Jasmine is my favorite. The next day it's Carol is my favorite.
Yeah. Carol is pretty wild. It is so beautiful and powerful for so many reasons, and exhilarating. It's such an exhilarating story and then the chemistry between those 2 actors. It's on fire. It's really phenomenal. And it really is them. Like there's no plot devices. There's no, pyrotechnics. There's nothing. It's really just them. And so that is really, it's a super impressive performance.
So we'll get into the chemistry between Cate and Rooney Mara and Carol. But before we get there, I just want to set it up for the audience. So this is the final season of Sundays with Cate. We have covered almost all of Cate Blanchett's movies. We have just a few to cover this season, including Carol, plus the 2 movies she made this year, which are Nightmare Alley and Don't Look Up. If you're listening to this, hopefully you've already checked our episode on Nightmare Alley, which was released last week. And for Carol, instead, we're going to do a miniseries, same as we did with Blue Jasmine, but instead of doing it over 3 episodes, one after the other, we're going to do 4 or 5 episodes, depending on the guests I'm getting. I'm trying to find some amazing guests like Luke. And we're going to sprinkle them throughout this last season of Sundays with Cate. So today, this is the first episode we're doing about Carol, and there will be 3 or 4 more, and they will be sprinkled throughout the season. So get ready. We're diving deep into Carol. So Carol is directed by Todd Haynes. It is based on the novel by Patricia Highsmith, written by Phyllis Nodge. It was released in 2015 and rocked everybody's world. I remember the movie premiered at Cannes in May, and I remember that I was just glued to Twitter that day, just looking at reactions about Carol, because I love Todd Haynes. I have loved all of his movies. He's made 1 movie with Cate before this, which was I'm Not There. And when this movie was announced, I, just was waiting for it breathlessly. Maybe for 2 years, it got delayed a little bit, and then finally it came and it's pulled in Cannes. And then I was lucky to actually see it just a couple of months after that in a test screening. And then I saw it so many times when it was playing at the Paris Theater in New York. So Luke, let's start there. Do you tell me, you talked about the chemistry between Cate and Rooney, but what's your first impression about Carol?
My first impression is, gosh, it's so alive. It's such a universal love story, right? It's this, you can't help but just, like, your heart aches for these 2 characters. You feel the visceral longing, which, no matter what background you are, whether you're gay, straight, or trans or anything, anyone who loves understands that sense of longing. And there's that, the sense of how do you turn, like, a glance across a room at someone, locking eyes with someone you're attracted to, watching that become love is just such an exciting and beautiful thing to watch. And I think when you find actors that can do it in such a way that feels so honest, and they grapple with all of the insecurities that come with allowing yourself to be vulnerable enough to fall in love. It just becomes, you can't help but admire that bravery in that journey. And I think this is just so wonderful. I also think it's just so wonderful to see it as a lesbian story, because I feel like we've seen this a lot. There's a lot there. Well, not a lot, not nearly enough for the LGBT.
Never enough. Yeah,
at all. Not nearly enough. I do feel like these love stories tend to swing in the male, like the male homosexual. We have a lot of those in that genre. And we don't have a lot of really wonderful lesbian love stories, at least ones that, shy away from that sort of fetishization of lesbians by the male gaze.
Yes.
But what I love about this is that, all of the gay movies, they end in heartbreak.
Yeah.
And this one doesn't. And I cannot tell you how much joy that fills me with to see that they make this choice. They make the most terrifying choice, and yet it's like you can't help but rejoice that they would do that.
Yeah, it's a promise, right? Like we're starting at the end, but I think that's beautiful because the ending is really what makes this movie special. I mean, even Patricia Highsmith talked about it when she wrote the book. She wanted to make sure to write a book that ended where, none of the women died or were put in an institution. Like that was a guiding sort of a force for her to write the story. And it doesn't end, the ending is just a promise of maybe we'll make it. Maybe tomorrow is a better day. It's just the right hint of hope, just a little bit of hope and a little smile from Cate to sort of like end this wonderful story. And I think the ending is really beautiful. And also, it's sort of heartbreaking when you start to watch this movie, and the first scene, the movie starts with that guy entering into the plaza, and then he sees Therese and interrupts them. And it's so heartbreaking when, almost 2 hours later, we get back to that same bit, and the interruption comes right after Carol says to her, "I love you," and Therese doesn't even have a second to respond before the interruption.
So intense. It is so intense. It's so crazy because like at the beginning you're like, oh God, who did they kill? Right? Like this is an awkward thing to interrupt. And then you get to that moment in the end of the movie and you're like, no, he's coming. He's coming. He's coming. And it's so, and that whole interaction between those two women, that boy is coming. And you're like, God, what if you're like hoping for sliding doors, that maybe he didn't come this time and they like managed to work it out. And then it kills, and it kills then her reaction, because then you watched her leave the drinks before and say, no, go have fun. And so like the whole time, exactly what she's about to do and how she's about to act, how she's about to put that mask back on and put that shield back up. And you're like, don't, because you're so close.
You're right there. You're almost there. And it also just makes, as many times as I've seen this movie, it just makes the sort of like heartache comes right at the beginning, like because he's right there at the beginning and you remember what he's interrupted. But when I think about this movie, I think about it as a series of 6 big set pieces or big sort of meetings between Carol and Therese as they are telling us this love story. And so the 6 main set pieces in my mind, and tell me if you agree, Luke, are they're meeting at the department store where Carol leaves her gloves there. So gorgeous. Then Therese visiting Carol in New Jersey for Christmas on the 21st. And then the roof over Therese's apartment where they decide to go on the trip together. Then Waterloo, which is, when they consummate the love. And then the gun scene,
Chicago.
This movie,
is that Chicago? Yeah.
I think it's Chicago, yeah. So this is a movie that introduces a Chekhov gun that actually never goes off. And then the final one, which was just we were talking about. They're meeting at the plaza and the Oak, and then Therese following Carol into the Oak Room and the end of the movie where they get together.
Oh, wow.
So the first, it's just all these scenes, all these set pieces, because they're more than just scenes, are just so wonderful. So the first one is the department store, and this one is so there's so many details in it that I just love. This is a movie so rich with details. There's so many details in this one because they're flirting, but they're also just talking about trains and dolls and how Christmas makes Carol nervous because she's afraid of burning the turkey. They talk about everything except all what they're feeling for each other, which is even from very first moment a lot.
Oh, yeah. You know what? I actually was thinking about this. There's a great line, the friend who later on hits on Therese, that's like the movie, he's like the other artist. And he, when they're watching that movie, Therese her fiance or would wanna be fiance and the friend, they're watching the movie, and the friend is like, taking notes. I'm like, what are you doing? He's like, oh, I'm mapping out what they're saying versus what they're actually feeling and thinking.
Yes.
And it made me think of like my own, like how I write screenplays and when I do dialogue. My first draft is exactly what they're thinking and feeling. And then my second draft is like, I go through and I change every line to the complete opposite, because like there's this, there is this reality that characters are never actually saying what they're thinking and feeling. And when I saw this, and this all clicked for me around my love of Cate Blanchett, because she is a master at the subtext. I mean, she's a master at language, right? She can say, I mean, you can write the most awkward line and she will perform it, and it's brilliant, right? And it's so loaded, and she's found all of that texture to it. And it's like there's this part of her that has always got like it's like almost like the opposite is always going on inside of her from what she's saying. And this scene totally exemplifies that. But I think that what's even so special about this scene is that they reveal to each other through talking about trains and dolls.
Yes.
They reveal to each other that they don't fit into this like normative that they're being forced to operate within, right? They talk about trains and dolls, and really what they're saying is like, oh, I don't belong here with all these women shopping for their kids either. Like neither of us belong here.
Yeah. That's a wonderful way to look at it. And then, and then she leaves her gloves. And this scene is so wonderful in that all these things that they're talking about, it's not what they're feeling, but then everything they're feeling is in the eyes, which goes back to that smoldering chemistry between Cate Blanchett and Rooney Mara. So I asked her, I was at the premiere of when Carol played the New York Film Festival, and, I just raised my hand. I want to ask Cate Blanchett a question.
As one should always do when in the presence of Cate Blanchett, obviously.
Yes, absolutely. I haven't been in her presence since, but hopefully soon. So I asked her, how is she so perfect in this film? I was trying to be more articulate than that, but that's how the question came out anyway. And then she said it's in the gaze into Rooney's eyes, which was her answer, which is so true. And this is sort of like exemplified by this scene. This is the first time they set that up for us.
It's really powerful. I mean, some of the stuff that she does with her face is so subtle in this movie. I mean, we are in the close-up so much of this movie, and we are in Cate's close-up for so much of this movie. And it's like there are these moments that, where they speak so loudly, and it's barely even a facial movement on her face. And it's like she's screaming. It's really powerful.
So the first time when I saw this film, it's a film starring Cate Blanchett, directed by Todd Haynes. So I was ready to fall in love with it no matter what. But the first time I saw it, the moment that I knew, oh, this movie is so special, is the car ride into New Jersey when Carol picks Therese, and they're in Carol's car, and then the sort of like, we don't hear their conversation, the sound goes down and the screen floods with green as they are in the tunnel, and they put on the radio, and then it also cuts back a little bit to Therese in the present framing device, and then back to the tunnel. It's like a dream, like a memory. And I just remember it's like somebody found a way to visualize falling in love. And it's just, it's so that I love that. Like visually, I think that's the strongest bit of the movie.
It's so powerful. I mean, there's some really, I also really love the cab in the beginning and the end with the water like dripping down it too. It's also very like that, like barricaded behind that is another very powerful visual moment of them being separated, and Rooney Mara's character being really lost about what to do. But there's something so great about when they're in the tunnel and when they're headed to New Jersey, because it's like I think about when I fell in love with my partner and how I have no frigging clue what we ever talked about. But I
Yeah.
very much remember being by his side in these moments when I was being flooded with that adrenaline and that serotonin that's happening. And it's like it's like your whole body vibrates when you're in the presence of this person. And and like that's what that accomplished for me, right? Was that like they could be talking about anything, it doesn't matter.
No,
it's all about that, like they are vibrating, like their energy together are just kind of hitting each other in the right place, and they are
it's such a wonderful scene. And Todd Haynes always sort of in all his movies, like if you think of Far From Heaven, if you think of Safe, he always is able to tell us internal stories of the lives of women, which is, not a lot of people do. And this time he had two instead of one. Usually he just has one. But this time he had two, and he was just able to tell us this just wonderful love story. So I want to talk a little bit about Cate. So her look in this film is very specific. So I think to me, it's what I think of when I think of Cate, is very glamorous. Although, very glamorous, very femme. She's very blonde. The hair is blonder than it's ever been on any other film. The lipstick is redder than it's been in any other film. All the costumes are just so, perfectly streamlined to her body. Everything is perfection. And I think this sort of talks to the rigidity of Carol's life, the sort of box she is in as a sophisticated housewife in the 1950s. But also it talks how Therese sees her as the epitome of womanhood, if you want to call it femininity, or just, as her object of desire.
Right.
What do you think of the look, Luke?
I mean, if I'm being really honest, I saw it was my grandma. She came, the first image of her, maybe not the first image. Yeah, it was the first image of her, but especially the second one at the train, at the model train. I was like, that is my grandma. That is the photos of my grandma. That is how my grandma poised herself until the very last day. That was, and my grandma she was not the perfect housewife. She was the one that loved to stir things up a little bit. She always loved to, she was the one that smoked. She was the first one with sunglasses. Sunglasses kind of became a thing in the 50s. And so like there's that scene where Carol's even walking around with the sunglasses and no one else on the street, not a single person has sunglasses.
That's true.
So great.
She's always the most sophisticated.
She is always the most progressive, sophisticated, stylish, and like, there is just something so it's so my grandma was also this like tall platinum, like 6 foot tall platinum blonde woman who always wore, she wore the bright red lipstick and the whole thing. Maybe it was the idealized version of what I imagined my grandma was like in the 50s.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. She's certainly playing an idealized version of a 1950s woman. Yes. And so because of the movie setting is in 1952, because, it's a Todd Haynes movie and he's known for doing period pieces, because of all, Cate's performance has sort of been compared to a lot of the stars of the golden era of Hollywood. And so me, when I was like thinking about this movie, I couldn't really pinpoint who she reminded me of, because she's always, Cate and Carol is always just a little bit more than another star. Not that I'm saying that she is better than all of them. What I'm saying is that in this performance,
are you?
maybe I am. In this performance, she's giving us, your heart. It's hard to pin down one, because when I think of her, I think of a softer Joan Crawford, a more sophisticated Betty Davis, a more femme Katharine Hepburn, because she drips with femininity. And like maybe the closest she comes to is Marlene Dietrich, but American. So even with Marlene Dietrich, it's not entirely there because she's American. So anyway, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, I had the same like issue. I couldn't, you sent me that question, and I was like, I was like trying to like rack my brain. I went on the internet, and I was like, she's all of these women.
Mm-hmm.
But she's none of them, right?
Yeah.
And it is, I mean, she has created she's become her own icon. She is her own thing, right? She is all of those women, and yet she is completely unique and individual in what she's brought to the world of cinema. And I actually think of her as like one of the few like surviving movie stars. Like I feel like movie stars are so different than they used to be, even as recently as the 90s, right? Movie stardom, I think, especially since social media, and since social media has changed the whole world of fame, I think that movie stars are no longer the same thing. And in part, maybe it's because there's not so much mystery. Maybe the other part is because they don't hold the place of fame, because it's like social media people are now worlds more famous than actors. But like Cate Blanchett is one of those people working now in Hollywood, and I'm like, oh no, she is an all-time movie star. She still, to me, maintains the title of movie star.
Yeah.
Right. Which so few of the working actors, I think, are movie stars, really. Yes. I mean, they're all fantastic. They can be super talented and really wonderful people that I admire, but like, there's that extra level of something where you create your own, what's the word I'm looking for? It's like she created her own identity, her own brand, her own like,
I think and there is also just something always unknowable. There's always a mystery to her. Like she is not as available as people are expected to be these days. But also even in her performances, even in something like Carol, there is always this little mystery to what she's giving us. Like she never lays all of her cards on the table. You can never know 100% of the character. There is always something held back a little, which just makes you want to look deeper into what's happening.
Totally. I mean, even in that vulnerable moment when she says, "I love you," and her voice cracks, and then it's like instant boom, like it's like back to the like incredibly deep, like, complex character with a lot of, barriers to the outside world, which is, by the way, that's who we all are, right? That's what makes it. We want to see a character like that. We don't want to see a character who wears everything out on their sleeve, because it's like, well, who has the privilege of doing that and not getting and surviving in this world, right?
Yeah. Oh, totally.
Yeah. It's that subtext, right? Like that's what brings her that subtext, is that mystery, is that like we can't quite, we're looking and we're watching and we're like, ooh, wow, okay. Like she said a lot more after she finished the line. Wow.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. I love this film so much. We've already talked a little bit. And every time I talk to someone about it, or I watched it, and I watched it twice to talk to you. Like the first time I watched it, watched it, I put it on and watched it. And then today, as I was just preparing to talk to you, I put it on in the background, and there are still scenes that come in that sort of like brings me back. Oh, no, I need to watch this one. So this second time I watched it, I was just struck by, we all know her chemistry with Rooney Mara is off the charts, and like everything is in the face and in the eyes. But kind of what struck me is the chemistry she has with Sarah Paulson as Abby. And it's sort of like this sort of very well it's not choreographed, very well drawn friendship of like, they're not in that many scenes together. Sarah Paulson only has a few scenes, but every interaction between them, there is like a history, and that these two women have known each other all their lives, and they have so much together just by the way they interact, sort of like the the comfortable body language around each other, the holding hands in a non-sexual way, but also such a loving way, the way they're able to tease each other, which is, of course, coming from the script, but it's just enhanced by the performances. What do you think of that, Luke?
So amazing. I mean, I think that they did such an incredible job and I mean, I think Sarah Paulson really delivered on this. The best friend, I don't want to say gay best friend, because that is a term that means something else. But like within the queer community, like they only had each other. There was no queer community, and whatever queer community existed was unavailable to them as upper class, housewives and women that were stuck in these little glass houses. So I thought that they did such an incredible job at tackling of course they were lovers at one point, because who else could they be lovers with? Right?
Yeah, totally. Right. Nobody else. Exactly.
Right. There was nobody else. But then there's this element of them that's like, but they both understand that there was never the same, they never had a scene of driving through the tunnel where everything goes green. Right.
Totally.
They had a scene where they just realized they were lesbians and they didn't know any other lesbians, so they made out. Right. It's so different than when you're like next to the person that makes your skin come alive, and you're aware of every millimeter of movement that they make in any direction, every breath they take, you're aware, you're overthinking it. You're so tuned in. They never had that. But they have such a great love and appreciation for each other as friends. And even though they have a sexual history, and I thought they did such a magnificent job at tackling that. And I'm sure, I don't know Sarah Paulson, I'm about to project something onto her, but I can assume that she has lived this, that there is someone in her life that is very much that person, right? That is very
totally.
I would love to have been a fly on the wall when they were working on these, because I like to imagine that Cate sat down with Sarah and was like, fill me in, tell me everything. Who are these women to each other? Well, what is this? What is this? Let me in on the secret kind of thing. Because that is a wealth of knowledge to tap just in Sarah Paulson's experience alone. And I think that they did an incredible job. I will say another thing that really stood out to me, but amongst all three women, is that I kept thinking to myself, wow, this is the cast of Cheekbones, man. There are some. I mean, there is not a shot without some cheekbones in it.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yes, definitely.
Cheekbone.
They could have Battle of the Cheekbones, and we will be the winners. So
you need some stunt coordinators in there to make sure they don't turn their head at the wrong moment and knock someone out.
So I think that sort of struck me, if you compare Carol and Abby with Therese, Therese is very naive, but Carol and Abby have this sort of unapologetic acknowledgement that they are queer, in their interactions with Harge, in their interactions with each other. They don't apologize for being queer at all, which is something that comes obviously from the fact that they lived through this together. It comes from the fact, that they are older than Therese, but it also comes from the fact, it comes from their privilege as women who are secure and have money. Exactly. So they are very unapologetic about it. I love to see that, and I know that the movie sort of doesn't address the class distinctions between Carol and Therese beyond that, but it does address it in sort of just showing us how naive Therese is, asking her boyfriend if queer love happens, and when Carol is just telling her husband, you know what, I invited the shop girl for drinks.
Yeah.
Which he says to her, that's bold.
It's great. It's great to see the woman have that power.
Yeah.
Isn't it?
Yeah, totally.
I mean, certainly there is a power struggle and a power dynamic with her family and with the husband. Is it Harge? Yeah. Certainly there's a struggle, and there's a moment when he gets to be on top, but it is so wonderful to see a lesbian female character start out in a place where she has the circumstances to be unashamed. I mean, there's a lot of shame in there, right? There's still a lot of shame, but that she can project no shame, that she can project, like, I mean, how many times have we seen, the white dudes with all the power, running around with mistresses? It's like, they're always allowed to talk to the shop girl and bring the shop girl home. It doesn't matter.
Yeah, totally. Yeah.
They're applauded for it. It's expected of them, right? And so it's so wonderful to see that sort of turned on its head.
And you're totally on the side of it. Like, there is a sort of loaded sort of like she is inviting her into a world where she has all the power. I'm talking about Carol here. She has all the power. But the movie sort of makes, steps a little bit to tell us not really, this is not that. There is a scene in the car later on where it's a scene about consent, where Therese says to her, I just offered everything, and then Carol says to her, I took what you offered willingly. So that conversation, I think, is a sly remark from the filmmakers that this is not a predatory relationship. This is not a relationship where one holds the power over the other, but there is consent, there's give and take.
Right. And even in the sex scene, it's consensual, because it is Therese that says, take me to bed. Right.
Yeah.
And so it's Carol that makes the first move, but it's Therese that provides the consent that then, allows it to progress. And you're right. I mean, there is also this period where Carol lets her go and supports Therese's ambitions and empowers her to be her own woman. I mean, Therese has this journey where she goes from being a little shop girl who is being forced into this, potential betrothal, and she gets a camera and she starts pursuing her own art, and then she gets a job with the Times, and then there's that wonderful scene where she's repainting the apartment, which like it makes the scene with Carol very complicated, because there's this part of you that says, when they get back together for those drinks, and when Carol says, would you want to come live with me? And I feel like I was conflicted, because I was like, but Therese just painted the apartment, and she's like she's finally discovering who she is and what she wants, right? How can she know what she wants if she always says yes, right?
Yeah. She always orders the same drink and meal.
Yeah. So it's this moment where you see Therese has finally come into her own. And so I think that when Therese does make the choice to go back to Carol, like, we don't see that Therese decides to move in with her. We just see that she decides to go to the Oak Room.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right? So we don't see that she ever hands that power back over. Right. Yeah. And Carol does, Carol, I think she says the words, I release you. Right. And it's in that interim period that Therese finds her own empowerment, her own power. And I think that Carol's character is always recognizing the power dynamic, and is always recognizing the age difference. And what does she say? There's a line about age where she says something about, like, you'll understand one day when
you're too young. In the letter. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, it's right before she says, I release you then.
Yeah.
That's in the letter too. Yeah.
Dearest, there are no accidents. Everything comes full circle. Be grateful it was sooner rather than later. You'll think it harsh of me to say so, but no explanation I offer will satisfy you. Please don't be angry when I tell you that you seek resolutions and explanations because you're young. But you will understand this one day. And when it happens, I want you to imagine me there to greet you. our lives stretched out ahead of us, a perpetual sunrise. But until then, there must be no contact between us. I have much to do, and you, my darling, even more. Please believe that I would do anything to see you happy. So, I do the only thing I can. I release you.
My favorite thing about Rooney Mara's performance, I mean, this is the Cate Blanchett podcast, but we can talk about Rooney Mara for a little bit. So what I really loved about her is kind of what you were talking about right now, about her performance, is sort of charting that journey. Like at the beginning, she's unsure, she's very naive, she's hesitant, she doesn't talk much. Her looks, her eyes are always sort of downcast when she's with Carol, as if she's stealing glances, doesn't want to like look her straight in the eye. You know, that always sort of gradually changes at the end where, you know, the end scene, she's looking straight at her, straight at her eyes. Her gaze is completely different. And also it's really well charted by the costume designer. Sandy Powell is a genius in how she dressed Therese at the beginning in sort of page boy hats and sort of these big coats and completely unsophisticated. The colors are sort of a little garish. And as the movie sort of progresses and you get to the end, she's very sophisticated. She's a mini Carol, but also sort of her own woman. You know, she is, I think, more business, less cocktail hour lady than Carol. So like the costumes totally tell you that story along with the performance.
100%. Yeah. I think that, yeah, that's right. And I mean, and it happens, like I said, when she paints those walls, man, that is powerful. She is making changes. There's actually this great moment that I love so much because it sort of foreshadows the journey that's about to come. It's like when they're talking about dolls, it's the first interaction they have. And they both realize that they both hate dolls. And there's this moment where Carol asks Rooney Mara what she likes. And it's like, you can tell in that moment that like Therese has never been asked what she likes. That question has just never, no one like, what's his name?
Richard.
What's the boy's name? Richard. He's never asked her what she wants. Like,
he's just buying her tickets to go to Europe, trying to marry her.
We're going to Italy together, right? That's what you want, because that's what I want.
Yeah.
I also love that like it's the same actor who did the White Lotus too. He comes back and plays that character again in White Lotus.
Take place
at a different time period, but it's like not that different.
That was Richard was his granddad.
Yeah, exactly. Direct lineage. Totally. I just think that that was a wonderful foreshadowing because her eyes do actually look up in that moment. And it's like her eyes come alive briefly. And then she realizes that she's gotten excited about something that she shouldn't have gotten excited about. And she goes back into that avoiding eye contact thing again. But there's that moment that I feel like foreshadows the overall journey. That's really wonderful.
Yeah. So Luke, as you know, I'm from Sudan. So I grew up eating completely different food than what people eat here in America. So I wanted to ask you, because when Carol orders cream spinach over poached eggs, I thought that was the most disgusting food order ever. And I'm just like, is this what people in America eat? I've lived here for a long time, so I know what people eat here, but maybe this is what they ate in the 50s.
I think that the 50s were the generation of the Eggs Benedict people. Like everyone I know who was like a young adult in the 50s, meaning like my grandmother and her friends, they all love Eggs Benedict. They love anything with poached eggs, which is, to me, I'm just like, I think it's so gross. I've like never liked Eggs Benedict. Like, it's such a funny thing. And then, but like, I just, I could see my grandma eating that 1,000%. Like, I'm surprised she never tried to serve that to me, honestly. It totally makes sense to me. You know, I do want to say another really funny thing that my grandma did that I think comes from that time period. She would serve us a dessert that she would call a fried egg. But it was a dessert. So it wasn't actually a fried egg. What it was a plate of finely spread whipped cream and a halved peach in the middle of it. So it looks like a fried egg, but it's peaches and cream.
Maybe that's what Carol served Therese after that Christmas.
After the eggs and spinach. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I mean, it was the Popeye, you know what? It's Popeye generation, isn't it? Isn't that when like Popeye was big? So, and he was all about that spinach, man.
Yeah. But, you know, a dry martini with an olive any day. So we should have one right after we finish podcasting.
Right. Yeah. 1 o'clock's not too early, right?
Yes. I forgot you're in California. It's almost 4 o'clock.
Carol, yeah, I'm sure for Carol, 1 o'clock is the correct hour to begin.
So I want to do a little sort of like this movie. I've seen it so many times that there are so many memorable line readings and, you know, lines that I just recognize. So we're going to do a little game where we eliminate until we get to the best line in the movie. So I'll say 2 lines, line readings from Cate, and you choose which you prefer until we get to the best line reading of the movie. But there is one line that I'm not going to include because it is the most obvious one. If we included it, it will just be the winner. You all know what it is.
What a strange girl you are.
Why?
Flung out of space.
So, Luke, are you ready?
I'm nervous, but let's do it.
Okay, so the first 2 are, just when you think it can't get worse, you run out of cigarettes. And, you know, everybody...
Oh, it's like total. I don't smoke. I've never smoked. And I was right there. I was like, yeah, exactly.
And I apologize to the listeners because I can't do Cate Blanchett. So I'm just going to read these. I'm not going to pretend that I can do Cate. So the cigarettes one over Ask Me Things. Which one do you like more?
Oh, gosh.
Which she says that over the phone after Therese leaves.
It's so vulnerable. It's so, it's like, yeah, gosh. That's really tough. I'm gonna go with Ask Me Things because it's so vulnerable, and it's like her voice just like it does something. So I feel like it's like on multiple levels at the same time. You know, I think that the cigarettes like are so like, I'm with you, girl. But the Ask Me Things is like a crack in the character where I'm like, oh, I love this woman so much. Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move from Carol and Therese to Carol and Harge, and their, battle over the custody of Rindy. And there are 2 lines there. One is, the first one is when she repeats back to the lawyer when he tells her what Harge is suing her for, and she just drops her voice and says, a morality clause? So that's number 1. And then the next one, she says to Harge, which is, we're not ugly people, Harge.
Yeah, it's definitely we're not ugly people. And it's the lines leading up to that too, where she stands up and says like, drop it, yo.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think definitely we're not ugly people. Oh, because she says, we're going to go to court, because if you don't agree to this, then we will go to court. And when we go to court, things will get ugly. And we're not ugly people. Oh yeah, definitely. Hands down.
Okay, so then we are on the same bracket. So now you have to choose between We're Not Ugly People, Harge, and Ask Me Things.
Oh.
This is the last one in this bracket. Then we will move to the other bracket.
Oh, We're Not Ugly People, Harge is so it's like a very empowering moment, but I got to go with Ask Me Things. It's still that moment that makes me crack, you know. I want to be as vulnerable as her in that moment.
Yeah, I love the way that, and she's like, the camera's just on the back of her head and she's on the phone and the cigarette. I mean, before we finish this game, let's just have a moment for every time Cate Blanchett lights a cigarette or takes a drag of it. It's just so, and I'm mimicking that
It's
right
so
now.
good.
Only Luke can see me, but
Oh.
it's like
She is a master. Her body, her voice, like everything she does, it's so brilliant. Every
yes.
like cell of her body is brilliant.
Yeah. She is one of those actors who really knows how to use every inch of her body to tell a story. It's not just what she's saying or her face or eyes. It's everything.
Absolutely. There's a moment actually. So as I was the audience doesn't know, but you know this, that I was a ballet dancer for 12 years with San Francisco Ballet. And I have a great respect for movement and things that are like difficult to do. And there's this moment that I think I think normal people wouldn't recognize, but it like has this subconscious like awareness of like what she does. She's trying to wrap the train set. She's doing a terrible job, right?
Yeah.
Rooney Mara's over at the piano, and Cate gets excited and bounces up, and she in that tight dress, in heels, or maybe she's flat. Actually, she's barefoot. But she's in that tight dress. She does not use her hands to stand up off the floor. And it's like, I had a moment where I just was like, I kind of like jumped up myself and I was like, holy cow, how did she do that?
Yeah.
What? It's otherworldly to watch someone do that. And I think what's great about it is in that moment, you can see this it was like an otherworldly giddiness that kind of lifted her off the carpet too. So it was like, there was she chose not to use her hands there.
Yeah.
She was like,
I love that moment too. And I have noticed it. And I think when I asked her at that premiere at New York Film Festival, I meant that moment because she is perfect in that moment. But I also think if she had used her hand, it would have sort of broken that perfection, because at all times in the movie we're seeing her from Therese's eyes, and Therese will not see her do something as ordinary or vulnerable that everybody else can do, like lean on your hands. Yeah.
Instead, she'll just lean and be sideways without any support, and it makes sense. And you're like, okay, it's Cate Blanchett; she can do that.
Yeah. I love that.
Defy physics and just stand up.
Yeah, I'm so happy you brought it up. I love it. So let's go back to finishing our game. Only a couple more.
Yeah.
So we're gonna do one from the sex scene, two from the sex scene. So when she first looks at Therese's naked body, she says, "I never looked like that." And then the next day, when Therese asks her where they are, she says, "Waterloo, isn't that awful?" So which one do you prefer?
It's obvious. Waterloo, duh. That moment is like, I mean, like, it could not be better. That's great. Waterloo, duh.
Okay, so now we have Waterloo, isn't that awful versus We're Not Ugly Harge. Whoever wins is going to go with the top two that, in my ranking. So,
I thought we said Ask Me Things over We're
Oh,
Not
yeah. That's right. It's Ask Me Things. Oh, duh. Yeah. I should be taking notes. Okay.
Don't worry, I got it.
Okay, so Ask Me Things over Waterloo, isn't that awful?
Oh, Waterloo, isn't that awful? Or Ask Me Things. Oh, this is tough. You got me to a tough spot. I think I'm going to go with, they're such pivotal moments, both of them. Waterloo, isn't that awful?
Okay, good. So now
because it's foreshadowing everything that's about to happen too.
Yeah, totally. I love it. The thing is, with this game, there are no wrong answers because all these line readings, all these line deliveries are fantastic. So it just gives us a way to talk about them. So the last two are from the beginning of the movie, which is, that first scene where they meet in the department store. The first one is one that I love just because it's the most vulnerable moment to visualize Carol, Miss Perfect, doing anything wrong when she says, um, you know, Christmas, when she's talking about Christmas, and then she says, then you end up burning the turkey anyway, which is like, she's like, oh, I'm human too. I burn the turkey, which is kind of why I like it. But the other one is the big meme that everybody loves, which is when she leaves and looks back and she says, I like the hat. So which one do you prefer?
Oh, I mean, I'm going to go with the turkey. We're just in that season and it's just,
Let's go with the turkey.
I literally burned like some salmon the other night making dinner for people. It was like, it was just so, yeah, I'm going with the turkey.
So for the finale, the turkey or Waterloo?
No, it's Waterloo.
All right.
It's definitely Waterloo.
I agree. Waterloo isn't that awful. It's such a great moment because it's, that giddy morning after, they're sort of in the glow. But like you said, it's also foreshadowing all the stuff that's coming.
Well, and she thinks it's a joke. You can tell that she thinks like, you're my weakness. Like there's this element to it where she doesn't really realize how defeated she is in that moment because she doesn't know that she was just recorded.
Yeah. So listeners, if you agree and love Luke's choice of Waterloo isn't that awful, or if you disagree, let us know. You can tweet us, comment. Let us know what's your favorite line reading of Cate Blanchett in Carol.
I should also point out that there are some like epic non-lines in this movie too. I think that, and my favorite is actually the last close-up of her when she sees Therese in the oakwood room.
Yes.
That smile, she doesn't even smile. But we see the smile.
Yeah.
It's like
just a little bit. Yeah.
Oh, it's like, it's just so it's so real and powerful and glorious.
Yeah. A favorite moment of mine is sort of, obviously the ending, but also another one is when she picks up Therese and Richard is being all like protective boyfriend and she just like gives him a mocking salute. She just does as she's driving away. She's like, whatever, Richard.
Totally. It's so great. So many great unspoken moments. Oh man.
We can talk about Carol a lot. We can talk about Carol all day. And we are going to talk about Carol more on this podcast. As I said, we'll have a few more episodes in this last season of Sundays with Cate. But Luke, before we go, I want to ask you a couple more questions about Cate Blanchett.
Okay.
So do you think Cate Blanchett is sort of like, I think, recognized as one of the best actors ever? People love her. She's always, even in movies that, people don't love that much. I've just seen Don't Look Up. I don't think it's a great movie. I'm sorry, everyone who was looking forward to that.
Oh, no.
But, she's still good and watchable, but then I'm biased. But do you think that she was ever... do you think she was ever underrated? Is there a movie that you love that maybe other people don't love as much that you've watched for her?
Well, gosh, I think a lot of people don't know The Gift.
Yeah.
And it's in my top performances by her, which is really funny. I
like The Gift. I like her a lot in The Gift. She's doing an accent. She's always great at accents. She's doing a Southern accent as that. And she's always playing something different than.
By the way, as a Southerner, I am hypercritical of people that do Southern accents. It, can be really horrible. And I was like kind of all in with her on that.
Yeah.
I guess that's what I would say. I don't know. I think there's probably a lot of movies that I haven't seen of hers that are those, in fact, underrated movies.
We've probably talked about them in this podcast, me and my guests. So
I'm sure I need to go into the archives and like have a whole month dedicated to catching myself up on some of these things. I'm looking at her IMDb right now just to make sure.
Okay.
Oh, like, wait a minute. Eyes Wide Shut, uncredited voice, mysterious woman.
Yes, this was a story that was revealed, like, I don't know, 2 years ago or something like that, on the 20th anniversary or 30th anniversary. I don't know how long ago Eyes Wide Shut was. And apparently she re-recorded an actress who was in the orgy. She was one of the women in the orgy at the beginning of the movie who didn't sound American because she was British. So they brought in Cate Blanchett at Nicole Kidman's recommendation to re-record that voice. Apparently she had a perfect American accent, even though she's not American.
According to Nicole, of course, right?
Yes, yeah.
I love the judge of perfect American accents is no longer up to Americans. Yeah, maybe that's it. Because, like, did any of us know? That's wild.
It's so funny. I watched that movie several times, but never knew. I have watched it once after, and frankly, I did not. Like, I was listening. Am I going to recognize Cate's voice? But it's also Cate's voice from 1999. So, I really didn't. So we talked about Sarah Paulson and Rooney Mara in this film. Who do you think is your favorite scene partner for Cate?
Well, I mean, it's Rooney. It's Rooney. And maybe that's a screen time thing. They got a lot more time to develop and build, and like they had more screen time. So there's more to pick from. So it's kind of an unfair question. Why would you ask that?
Right, especially when we're talking about the smoldering chemistry between Rooney and Cate. Yeah, nobody else will hold up to that. Absolutely, you're right.
There is that best friend energy, and when they're sitting up in the alcove toward the end together, and she's asking Abby. Carol's asking Abby, "How is Therese?" That's a really great scene. I mean, there's so much friendship and tenderness and love there in that scene. But I would say, just based on like the amount of time that they had to develop their relationship, it's Rooney.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is a great note to end on. Luke, you were a wonderful guest. Thank you so much for coming on Sundays with Cate.
Yeah, thank you for having me. This was so fun.
And before we go, Luke, can you tell our listeners where they can find you and your work?
Sure. I guess the best place is Instagram. I'm at Luke Willis, and I try to post my projects there. I'm not always the best about it. I'm not really great at it, but that is the best place to check me out. And you can see the film that I had at New Fest, which you programmed, and we had a great Q&A for that. Pool boy. And then I do actually have some very exciting things that are dropping on Instagram in the new year that I will be screaming to the mountaintops from my Instagram account about. So,
all right. I'm excited. Yeah. I'm looking forward to that. So everyone, make sure to check Luke's Instagram. What is your Instagram handle?
It's at Luke Willis.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Luke. And you can find me on Twitter at ME_says, and follow the podcast on Twitter and Instagram at Sundays with Cate. And until next time, thank you for listening.